Hello. This is a Deltarune theory video. That being said, there is not a visual element to it, so perk up your ears and feel free to listen in while you work on something else. This theory condenses about 10 months worth of research, discussion and debate which I have compiled into a series of conclusions regarding the nuances of Deltarune. Because of how all-encompassing this theory is, a majority of the evidence backing each point will be skipped. This is simply due to the fact that if I showed the evidence I have amassed, the video would be several hours long. In any case, if you would like to hear evidence of any of the points I put forward, please do not hesitate to ask in the comments. Please keep in mind that precisely dating events to specific years is impossible, and my entire set of dates could be off by a year or two. This is not a flaw with the theory itself, it is merely a consequence of working with incomplete information. Let us begin. The first part of this theory has to do with how exactly Undertale and Deltarune are related. Deltarune takes place in a parallel world to Undertale, with the only difference between the two worlds being that Chara did not exist in the Deltarune world. This is the only fundamental difference between Undertale and Deltarune, as all other apparent differences stem from Chara not existing, having a butterfly effect in which more and more differences begin to crop up over time. In other words, whether or not Chara exists determines which timeline is taking place. Please keep in mind, Undertale and Deltarune do not exist in the same linear timeline, meaning that what happens in one has no effect on the other, and what Undertale ending you got doesn't matter to what happens in Deltarune. In the Deltarune timeline, ancient history is exactly the same as it was in Undertale. The human-monster war happens, the monsters lose and are sealed underground. Chkn is the royal scientist before he is eventually scattered across time and space, and Asriel Dreamer is born on the same date. Almost everything exactly the same between the two timelines until 2010X, the year that Chara would have fallen if they had existed. From that point onwards, differences from the events of Undertale begin to crop up in the Deltarune timeline, though some events remain the same. For example, the 6 unnamed fallen humans each fall into the underground on the same date that they would have in the other timeline. Early in 2010X, most likely 2010, is the date that Chara would have fallen in the Undertale timeline. However, we are looking at the Deltarune timeline, and thus, Chara does not exist. Because of this, Asriel spends another year alone until about 2011, when the first of the 6 humans with the colored souls fall into the underground. This new first human is Kris, and they are carrying with them a light blue soul, a toy knife, and a ribbon, and are about 2 or 3 years younger than Asriel. Kris is adopted by the Dreamers, and things are cool in the underground. It should be of note that because Chara did not exist, Asriel would not be killed by Chara's plan, leading to Asgore not declaring humans be killed. Further down the line, between Kris's fall in 2015, the remaining 5 unnamed humans also fall into the underground and are adopted by other monster families instead of being killed. The final human to fall is Frisk, who falls late into the year of 2015, and with Frisk's arrival, there are a total of 7 human souls in the underground, enough to break the barrier without anybody having to hurt or kill one another. After the humans altogether destroy the barrier, the monsters and the 7 humans escape the underground and establish hometown on the surface, though a majority of them have moved to other locations. It should be of note that because of how the monsters escape the underground in the Deltarune timeline, the prophecy of the angel rendering the underground empty goes unfulfilled, meaning that it is possible that it will be fulfilled at a later time, even though the underground is already empty, which could have disastrous or potentially even apocalyptic implications. By the time that Deltarune begins, monsters have been living on the surface for about 5 or 6 years, with hometown being the same age, and the current year being about 2021 to 2022. We, the player, are somehow contacted and connected to the Deltarune world by Chkn and his technology, but before the player enters that world, Kris is granted the power of determination, most likely also by Chkn. Although it is not exactly clear how they came into this knowledge, Kris has become aware of the player's abilities and the potential danger they pose, and so before we are inserted into the timeline, Kris begins to develop a plan in order to deal with us. They know that their determination abilities will be lost once the player enters their world, since the player's determination is strong enough to overpower their own, so Kris decides to use the ability to load, while they still can, in order to formulate a grand conspiracy to accomplish the following things. Number 1. Keep the player on a single path towards a single ending without letting them escape this path. Number 2. Trick the player into willingly taking the steps towards that single ending. Number 3. Eventually banish the player after gathering or draining enough power to do so. Number 4. Preventing the end of the world, which would be essentially inevitable if the player was left unchecked. Kris uses the Groundhog Day style of learning how to prevent your escape by doing practice runs in which the events of the game play out, but the player's soul is not present. Basically, Kris designed a path and then used the determination ability to load in order to figure out what to do or say to cause other characters and objects to react in specific ways that help keep the player on the path to the ending in which they are banished. Kris also created Ralsei as an aid to help shepherd the player through the dark worlds, every single one of which Kris also created. Yes, this does mean that Kris is the knight, however, the knight is not a real antagonist. It is merely a fictitious concept that is meant to convince the player that there is a true antagonist at play, which gives the player a goal, and therefore acts as a bait to keep the player moving forward. The player has no hopes of escaping Kris's conspiracy, the only ending to the game will consist of the player's banishment. From the instant that you enter their world, Kris is standing ready to snatch up your soul and use their own body as a vessel, giving them a higher degree of control and allowing them to further curtail your freedom and limit your options. However, Kris's plan is not flawless. When it comes to your freedom, because Kris has given you a small amount of wiggle room in order to keep the conspiracy better concealed, it is possible to cause a situation to arise in which something Kris does not want to happen happens by performing an incredibly strange and specific series of actions. This is because Kris did not account for such a weird route to be taken when they were planning how to deal with you, even though they were successful in corralling you onto a path towards an unavoidable ending. As you can probably guess, this is what happens on the Snowgrave route, which in the code is referred to as the weird route. In summary, Deltarune takes place in an alternate world where Chkn didn't exist, and the story consists of the player being both fooled and forced by Kris into willingly walking onto an inescapable path towards their own banishment. Thanks for listening. I look forward to your questions. You can contact me in my Discord DMs, my account username can be found in the description. I also frequent a public Undertale Discord called The Core, as well as Mystic Slime's Discord, where you can find my ramblings in the theory channels. I have several other Deltarune theory and explanation videos planned and are posted in the description. If you are interested in one topic in particular, comment about it and I will work on the most popular choice first. To end things off, Toby Fox, you are an excellent storyteller, but I am an excellent detective. I may know how Deltarune begins and how it ends, but I look forward to the journey ahead, and once I've experienced it, I promise to accept my actions and not interfere any further. Thank you.